The rent notice was pink, the kind of pink that screamed final warning even before you read it. Claire Whitaker stood in the hallway of her aging Seattle apartment complex, soaked from the November rain, one hand gripping the notice, the other juggling a grocery bag that had just split open at the bottom. A can of tomato soup rolled away and clanged down the stairs like a bell tolling doom. Her 7-year-old son, Eli, stood a few steps behind her, clutching his backpack, trying not to look worried. He was getting good at that. Too good. "Mom," he said quietly. "I'm okay," she lied, bending down to catch a runaway apple. The truth was, she hadn't been okay in a long time. She unlocked the door with a sharp twist, shoulders tense like they always were now. The apartment smelled like stale coffee and yesterday's laundry, and the flickering light in the kitchen had finally died. She set the ruined bag on the counter, blew out a long breath, and opened the mailbox pile that had gathered over the past few days. Water bills past due. A credit card statement she hadn't opened in 3 months. A coupon for a pizza place they couldn't afford. And then an envelope. Cream-colored. Heavy paper. Embossed in gold with the name James R. Beckett, Attorney at Law, Spokane, WA. Claire stared at it, frowning. She didn't know anyone in Spokane. She didn't know any attorneys, period. She glanced at Eli, who had settled at the kitchen table and was pulling out his math homework tongue, poking out in concentration. She broke the seal with a butter knife and pulled out a single thick document. Last Will and Testament of Samuel Whitaker. The name hit her like a ripple in still water. Samuel, her great-uncle, her grandmother's brother. A man she'd only met twice, once when she was 6, again when she was 9. Both times he'd smelled like pine trees and old paper, and he'd given her a silver dollar she later lost in a laundromat. She scanned the pages. The will was simple and direct. Samuel had died 6 weeks ago. No children, no spouse, no debts. He had left everything to her. Everything it said included a house, a property tucked deep in the Cascade Mountains about 40 miles northeast of Seattle. 47 acres, heavily forested. The house, originally built in 1949, had been empty since Samuel moved into assisted living in 2018. Access was limited. No power grid, no internet. Only reachable by logging roads that were nearly impassable after snowfall. Claire stared at the page. Her heart thumped once hard. She didn't have anything. Not savings, not backup, not a plan. Her car was a decade older than Eli. The waitress job barely kept them afloat. And now this, a piece of land, a house, property. It felt like a trap and a miracle all at once. "How's homework going?" she asked without looking up. "I'm stuck on fractions," Eli said, chewing on his pencil. "You're brilliant at fractions," she said softly. She meant it. He was brilliant at a lot of things, especially surviving. That night, after he fell asleep, Claire sat cross-legged on the living room floor with her laptop, the sound of the dripping kitchen faucet keeping time like a metronome. She searched for information on Samuel Whitaker. There wasn't much. An old land record, a brief mention in a Cascade Historical Society journal from 1957, and a grainy black and white photo, a man standing in front of a squat cabin, hand resting on a rusty pickup. The caption: Samuel Whitaker, local property owner. Local owner of what? The photo made her shiver. The next morning, Claire called the number on the letter. Beckett's voice was low and gravelly, the kind of voice that came with dark wood offices and years of unspoken things. "Yes, Ms. Whitaker. I've been waiting for your call." He explained the transfer process quickly. The property taxes were current. There were no liens. The home had been checked quarterly by a management company, but frankly, he said it's in poor condition. Claire asked about the land. 47 acres, Beckett repeated. There's a stream, a mix of pine and fir mostly. The house is old, about 200 square feet. No modern updates. Might be worth more for the land itself. Can I see it? She asked. You'll need to go this weekend. Snow is coming. If you wait, the roads will be shut until spring. Claire hesitated, her hand tightening around the receiver. Bring supplies, Beckett added. Generator power only. No cell service past the main road. After she hung up, Claire stared at her reflection in the blank laptop screen. Her face looked tired, older than 33. But her eyes, they looked sharper than they had in a long time. She told Eli after school. We're going on a trip. He lit up. Like a vacation. Kind of, she said. More like an adventure. Eli packed his toy flashlight and a peanut butter sandwich. Claire packed water batteries, blankets, a worn pocket knife, and a small emergency bag she always kept stashed in the trunk just in case. They left Seattle before dawn on Saturday. The clouds hung low, dark and heavy, and the cold had a bite that crept under their coats. After 2 hours on the highway, they turned off onto an unmarked gravel road that groaned beneath her car's suspension. Towering pines swallowed the sky. Frost curled along the edges of the windshield. Then, without warning, the house appeared. Like it had grown out of the forest itself. It was small, squat, with a pitched roof leaning slightly to the left. The windows were boarded. The paint had long since peeled into gray flakes. Moss crept up the foundation like it had claimed the place long ago. Eli pressed his face to the window. Is that ours? As Claire's throat was dry. Yeah, she said. It is. She killed the engine and opened the door. The cold punched her lungs. As they stepped closer, a strange silence wrapped around them. No birds, no rustling, just the distant hum of wind through trees. Claire found the key. Beckett had mailed a small tarnished ring with 3 brass keys. The second one fit. The door creaked open with a groan that sounded like a warning. The air inside was stale, earthy. She swept her flashlight across the living room. Dust, a collapsed couch, a fireplace choked with ashes, everything untouched. But when she entered the kitchen, her breath caught. The pantry shelves were fully stocked. Canned beans, crackers, peanut butter, bottled water. Every label had a recent expiration date. Someone had been here. Recently, and they'd expected to come back. Claire turned slowly, her mind racing. She didn't know yet what was hidden beneath her feet. Didn't know about the steel door. Didn't know about the bunker. Didn't know about the gold. But something had shifted, and deep in her chest, something whispered. This isn't just a house, it's a Kai. The road was barely wide enough for Claire's car to squeeze between the trees. Gravel popped under the tires, and the deeper they went into the forest, the more it felt like the rest of the world had fallen away. Trees arched overhead like a canopy of shadows, thick with moss and early frost. The GPS had died 10 minutes ago, and cell service was long gone. She was navigating by printed directions James Beckett had emailed, now creased and stained from her coffee spill that morning. Eli sat in the back seat, bundled in 2 jackets and a knit hat that didn't quite cover his ears. He watched the woods flash by, eyes wide. This is really far, Mom. Claire glanced at him in the rearview mirror. I know, like, really far from everything. Yeah, she said, trying to keep her tone calm. That's the idea. They'd left the house behind them an hour ago. She hadn't told Eli about the pantry, about how fresh those supplies were, about how there were no cobwebs in that hidden door behind the bookshelf, about the strange, hollow silence of the woods. Something about the place unsettled her. It wasn't fear exactly. It was a sensation she couldn't name, like standing on the edge of something you couldn't see, but felt anyway. Her hands were still shaking when she'd climbed into the car this morning. She needed answers, and Beckett's documents hadn't given much. The only name she could think of was the one the attorney had mentioned offhand, the property manager who had supposedly kept tabs on the cabin. But they were unreachable. The only other lead was the town of Stevenson. "Why are we going to this place again?" Eli asked. "I just want to talk to someone who might have known Samuel," she said. "The guy who left us the house." Eli frowned. "You said you didn't really know him." "I didn't. But maybe someone else did." They passed a rusted sign for Stevenson. Population 1,497. The town was a scatter of wooden buildings along a narrow main road framed by mountains and the silent press of evergreen forest. A diner, a hardware store, a gas station with one pump. Claire parked in front of the diner and looked at the clock. 10:42 a.m. "Wait here, okay?" she told Eli. He nodded and opened a comic book. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside. The diner smelled like bacon grease and burned coffee. The booths were cracked vinyl, the kind that stuck to your skin. Two older men sat by the window nursing black coffee. A woman in a floral apron was wiping down the counter. Claire cleared her throat. "Excuse me." The woman looked up. "Coffee?" "No thanks. Actually, I'm looking for someone. I was told he used to live near the Whitaker cabin. His name's Wesley Burns." The woman raised an eyebrow. "You're up there," Claire nodded. "Wesley's at the service garage across the street. He does odd jobs, keeps to himself." "Thanks." Claire walked back out into the cold and crossed the street. The service garage was little more than a metal shed with a rusted sign that read Burns Auto. An older man in a green flannel shirt and denim overalls was working under the hood of a red pickup. She stepped carefully, boots crunching on gravel. "Mr. Burns." He looked up slowly, squinting against the sunlight. His hair was gray, cropped military short. His face lined like tree bark. "Depends who's asking." "I'm Claire Whitaker," she said. "Samuel Whitaker's grandniece." He shut the hood and wiped his hands on a rag. "Huh. So they finally let someone into that place." "He left it to me," she said. "I didn't know him well, but I'm trying to understand why he chose me." "I thought maybe you knew him," Wesley nodded slowly. "I knew Sam. Not well. He kept to himself. Always did. Fella wasn't one for small talk." "Do you know why he lived way out there?" Wesley chuckled dryly. "That place ain't for the friendly types." He liked silence. Liked being left alone. Some of us figured he was running from something. Or hiding something. Claire's heart thudded. Hiding what Wesley looked at her for a long moment, like weighing the worth of his words. "You see anything strange while you were up there?" Claire hesitated. Like what Wesley's eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't be asking me if everything felt right." She didn't reply. He took off his gloves. "I went up there once years back. Winter had hit hard. Roads were worse than usual. Sam hadn't checked in, so the sheriff asked me to swing by. And I got halfway up the trail when I saw tire tracks. Not his. Fresh ones. Newer truck. No plates. The kind that disappear when you try to follow them. I turned around. Told the sheriff I found the place empty. He never asked again." Claire swallowed. "You think people were watching him?" "I don't think," Wesley said. "I know." He glanced toward the trees just beyond the edge of town like he was still expecting someone to step out from them. "I'll tell you something else," he said. He used to come into town once a year, same day, every November. Buy canned goods, rations, tools, always paid in cash. Never spoke more than he had to. "That sounds about right," Claire said. Wesley stared at her. "You're not the first to come looking," he said quietly. "But you might be the last." She felt her skin prickle. "What do you mean?" He turned and walked back to his truck, opening the door. "Some things stay buried for a reason, Miss Whitaker. You go diggin', you better be ready for what crawls out." Claire nodded slowly, heart beating too fast, and walked back toward the car. Eli looked up from his comic. "Did he help? I'm not sure," she murmured. They drove in silence for a while back toward the cabin. The trees seemed taller now, the shadows longer. Claire's mind kept spinning. Tire tracks, silent visits, no plates. Why would someone hide out here for decades? What had Samuel been protecting or hiding? Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel. She thought again about the locked door, the food, the journal entry, "They think I don't notice." Whatever was waiting in that house hadn't been forgotten. It had been left behind. On purpose. And someone, maybe more than one, still cared enough to come looking. As the cabin came into view, Claire slowed the car. Because now she had more than questions. She had suspicions, and the courage to open the door behind the bookshelf was starting to feel like less of a choice and more like a necessity. The wind had shifted. Claire noticed it the second she stepped out of the car, a low whisper curling through the trees, like something breathing just out of sight. The cabin looked the same as when they'd left that morning, slouched against the tree line, draped in the weight of cold and memory. But now there was something else in the air. A presence. Or maybe that was just her imagination working overtime. Eli stood beside her, staring at the house like it might blink. "Can we go inside now?" he asked, voice quiet. Claire looked down at him. His cheeks were pink from the cold, and he'd pulled his hoodie tight under his coat. She gave a short nod, then reached for the key on the old brass ring. It turned in the lock with a groan, and the door creaked open into the same stale air as before. But now it felt different. She stepped inside and waited. No sound, no movement, just the muted crunch of her boots on the warped floorboards. Eli followed, flashlight in hand. The beam swept over the dusty furniture, the broken mirror above the fireplace, the sagging couch with foam guts spilling through cracked vinyl. Claire didn't speak. Not yet. In the kitchen, the air was colder, like the house itself was holding its breath. She walked to the pantry again, hand already reaching before her brain caught up. Still there. Still stocked. Still fresh. She scanned the shelves again, canned black beans, tomato soup, saltine crackers, peanut butter jars stacked like bricks, each label barely dusted. She picked one up and turned it in her hand. Best by July 2026. She stared at it. Mom. Eli's voice came from the living room. "Why does this place feel weird?" She exhaled slowly and set the jar back. "I don't know." That wasn't true, not entirely. She had a dozen theories, all fighting for space in her head. Maybe Samuel had stocked the pantry before he died. Maybe someone from the management company had done it, even though Beckett had said no one had been inside in years. Or maybe someone else had been using the house. Still was. She crossed back to the living room where Eli was kneeling beside the bookshelf again. He was running his fingers along the back paneling, then stopped abruptly. "There's a gap here," he said. Claire crouched next to him. He pointed. "Look. You can see a seam in the wall. Like like there's something behind it. She leaned in, her eyes adjusting to the shadows. He was right. Barely visible behind the shelf was the outline of a door, narrow vertical, with an iron handle just peeking through the sin. Claire stood and put both hands on the bookshelf. "Help me push." Together they nudged the shelf. It scraped across the floor more easily than she expected, sliding a few inches at a time until the door was fully revealed. It looked ancient. The kind of door you find in castles or fallout shelters. Iron handle, reinforced wood, no visible keyhole. Eli stepped back. "I don't think we should go down there." Claire stared at it. Her hand reached toward the handle instinctively, then stopped. It was colder than the rest of the room. She could feel it just standing near it, the chill that radiated from the seam, like it wasn't connected to the house above but something deeper. Subterranean. Forgotten. She let go and took a breath. "Let's look at the rest of the house first," she said. The hallway to the bedrooms was narrow and dim, the air heavier with each step. The first bedroom was small, barely enough space for the twin bed, a broken dresser, and a nightstand covered in dust. The second was larger. Samuel's, probably. Claire moved carefully, letting her flashlight sweep across faded wallpaper, moth-eaten curtains, and a rusted radiator that hadn't worked in decades. On the nightstand sat a leather-bound notebook. She picked it up gently. The first few pages were filled with numbers, dates, supply lists, short weather notes. But toward the middle, the tone changed. "Saw the car again today. Same spot on the ridge. Same guy behind the wheel. They think I don't notice." Claire flipped further. Not much time left. If she's reading this, she'll understand. Or she won't. Either way, it's not my burden anymore. She stopped. Her hands trembled slightly. "Who's she?" Eli asked suddenly beside her. Claire blinked. She hadn't realized he was reading over her shoulder. "I don't know," she whispered. But she did. Somewhere inside she knew. Samuel had been writing to her. He'd known what he was doing leaving her this place. It wasn't just about inheritance. It wasn't even about blood. It was about trust. "Let's go sit on the porch," Claire said. "I need to think." They sat on the steps wrapped in blankets, their breath fogging the air. The trees swayed with slow creaks, and a raven called once sharp and distant. Claire stared into the forest. There were too many questions. Why did Samuel isolate himself? Why the stockpiled food? Why the hidden door? Why now Eli leaned his head on her shoulder? "Is it okay if I'm a little scared?" She smiled faintly. "Yeah, me too." They stayed there until the sky began to darken with early winter dusk. Claire stood and kissed Eli's forehead. "I need to check something inside." "Just 5 minutes, okay? Stay right here." He gave her a look, half afraid, half trusting, then nodded. Claire stepped back into the house. The shadows inside had deepened, but she knew where to go. Back to the bookshelf. Back to the hidden door. Back to the chill that called to her. She gripped the iron handle. The door creaked open, revealing stairs that disappeared into blackness. She clicked on her flashlight. Its beam sliced the dark, hitting rough stone walls that dropped lower than she expected. The steps were clean. No cobwebs. No dust. But there were footprints. Fresh ones. She paused at the threshold, heart hammering. Somebody's been here, she thought. Recently. That's when she heard it, barely audible. A soft click. Maybe metal on stone. She turned the flashlight upward instinctively, but saw nothing. The silence settled again. Nobody stocks shelves like that unless they plan to come back, she murmured. She looked over her shoulder once more toward the front door, toward Eli. Then we descended. The first step creaked under Claire's boot, but only faintly. The air turned colder with each foot of descent, and the beam of her flashlight seemed to fade as though the darkness below wasn't just the absence of light, it was something heavier. Denser. Like it had mass. The staircase was longer than expected. At least 20 feet, maybe more. Stone walls on either side absorbed her breath and threw it back chilled. The steps were clean, too clean, free of dust, debris, even cobwebs, as if someone had swept them recently. Claire's heart was loud in her chest, but her feet kept moving. 10 steps, 15, 20. Then the narrow staircase leveled into a small concrete landing. And that's when she saw it. A steel door, massive, industrial, bolted 5 times across the frame from the outside like someone had gone to great lengths, not just to secure it, but to seal it shut. The surface was flawless. No rust. No age. Just thick gray metal with a subtle gleam from the flashlight's beam. Claire approached slowly, the silence pressing in. She reached out and touched the first bolt. It was smooth and cold. Her fingers hesitated. What is this doing in a cabin basement? This was no panic room, no storm shelter. She looked at the bolts again, thick rods of steel, each one larger than the last. She drew in a breath and slid the first one free. It moved easily, too easily. The second bolt followed, then the third, the fourth. The final one groaned slightly, and for a moment Claire considered stopping. Every part of her screamed caution. But curiosity was louder now. So was instinct. This wasn't just a room. This was the reason Samuel left her the house. She gripped the steel handle with both hands and pulled. The door opened without resistance. A rush of air spilled out, not musty, not stale, filtered, clean, cold in a way that didn't belong to nature. A controlled environment. Claire stepped inside and froze. This isn't a basement. It's a vault. The words slipped out of her mouth before she even realized she was speaking. Because it was true. The room was huge, at least 30 feet wide, maybe 40 deep. The walls were reinforced concrete paneled with steel. The ceiling was low and braced with industrial beams. In the far corner, thick ventilation ducts hummed faintly. Light switches lined one wall. Claire flipped one. Overhead, fluorescent tubes flickered to life, bathing the bunker in harsh white light. It revealed everything. Military ration boxes stacked waist-high. Shelves full of first aid kits, bottled water, gas masks. A workbench with tools arranged in perfect symmetry. And then against the back wall, crates. Large rectangular crates, stenciled with faded letters. Government. Authorized personnel only, date. Her throat went dry. She spotted a crowbar mounted on the wall nearby, wrapped in wire hooks. Claire hesitated only a second before grabbing it and crossing to the nearest crate. She wedged the flat end under the lid and pulled. The wood groaned and cracked. Nails squealed as they were ripped from decades-old fibers. She opened the crate and peered inside, wrapped in oiled cloth. She pulled one out and unwrapped it with shaking hands. Gold. A solid bar of it. Heavy, dense, smooth. Stamped Federal Reserve Bank. Certified gold, 99.99%. Claire dropped to her knees. She wasn't an expert, but she knew what she was looking at. A single bar could be worth hundreds of thousands. And there were dozens in the crate. Other crates stretched along the wall, maybe hundreds more. Her mind raced. This was impossible. How did Samuel get this? How did he keep it hidden for decades, and why her? She stood up and turned to the next crate. Another bar. Then another. She stopped counting at 5 crates. It was overwhelming, like she had stumbled into a dragon's hoard. But it wasn't the gold that chilled her the most. It was what she found next. A metal footlocker tucked beneath the crates, smaller. Padlocked, but the key was taped to the side with old masking tape and Samuel's handwriting for the right hands only. Claire unlocked it. Inside were manila folders. Dozens. Yellowed with age, stamped with red ink, classified. Project Cobalt. Eyes only. She lifted one out, opened it, and scanned the contents. Transfer orders. Signatures. Serial numbers for gold bars. Approvals from the Department of Treasury. Department of Defense. CIA. Each document dated between 1946 and 1964. Every single one detailed the movement of federal gold millions in assets diverted to undisclosed secure locations. Claire flipped page after page. The language was vague, clinical. References to Operation Fulcrum Black Wire and most notably Project Cobalt. Then, at the very bottom of the footlocker, a letter in simple handwriting. Dated 2017. Addressed to whomever finds this, Claire read aloud softly. My name is Samuel Whitaker. In 1946, I was asked to safeguard a shipment for national security. I was young. I trusted my country. I believed what they told me. They said they'd retrieve it within 5 years. No one ever came. Her hands trembled. The people who orchestrated this are either dead or sitting in high places hiding behind clean hands. What they left me was not gold. It was evidence of betrayal. And now I'm leaving it to you, Claire. She stared at the name, her name written in fading black ink. They will come for it. When they find out you have it, they won't knock. They won't ask. They'll erase, use this to protect yourself. And whatever you do, don't trust anyone who says they're from the government. Claire folded the letter slowly. She sat on the floor of the bunker surrounded by more money than she'd ever imagined, more danger than she could comprehend, and one chilling certainty. This wasn't about inheritance. It was a time bomb. Someone had kept it ticking for 70 years. And now it was hers. Suddenly, above her faint, almost imperceptible, she heard it. A sound. A soft metallic knock, like someone tapping steel, coming from somewhere in the house. She froze, then grabbed the crowbar in one hand and the footlocker letter in the other. Eli. She sprinted for the stairs. Claire's boots hit the stairs hard, one after the other, echoing like gunshots in the tunnel of concrete. She didn't stop to think. She just ran. The sound had come from above. Metallic. Intentional. Not the creak of an old house or the groan of shifting wood. It was sharper. Controlled. She reached the top of the staircase and slipped through the hidden door behind the bookshelf, heart pounding in her ears. Her flashlight beam darted around the room as she moved quickly through the shadows. Eli, she called, panic rising. No answer. Eli, she threw open the front door and bolted onto the porch. Her son was sitting on the steps where she had left him, hugging his knees to his chest. But he wasn't alone. A man stood at the tree line, half hidden in shadow. Tall, thin, wearing a black jacket and dark jeans, he was facing the house, directly unmoving. Claire stepped between the man and her son. Get inside, she whispered to Eli. Eli looked up, startled, but obeyed without a word. She backed through the door after him and slammed it shut. The deadbolt clicked into place, but it felt like a joke. That man hadn't needed to move. Just standing there had been enough. Who is that? Eli asked, voice trembling. I don't know, Claire said, breathing hard. She moved to one of the boarded windows, pulled back a slat, and peered through. The man was still there, still staring. Then headlights appeared down the logging road. Another vehicle. A black SUV pulled into the clearing and rolled to a stop beside her rusted Honda. The doors opened. 2 more people stepped out. A woman with close-cropped gray hair and a younger man in a suit that looked like it belonged in a corporate boardroom, not a frozen forest. Claire's pulse spiked. They spoke briefly with the man in the tree line. Then together, they started walking toward the house. Claire backed away from the window. "Pack your bag," she told Eli. "Now!" He ran toward the back room without asking questions. He'd seen the look in her eyes before. The one she didn't use unless things were really, really bad. She ran to the back door, unlocked. She turned the bolt, then dragged a heavy oak table in front of it. The front door thundered with a knock, firm, polite. "Miss Whitaker," a man's voice called. Calm, measured. "We need to speak with you. It's important." Claire said nothing. Another knock. "Miss Whitaker," he repeated. "We're with the Treasury Department. We have some questions about your great-uncle's property." Claire's skin turned cold. The letter in the bunker rang loud in her memory. "Don't trust anyone who says they're from the government." She grabbed Eli's coat and her emergency bag, yanking the zipper closed. The windows were too small to climb through. The only exit left, the only one that might work, was below. The bunker. Her gut twisted. She didn't want to take her son back into that cold vault surrounded by danger and secrets, but she had no choice. She crouched down in front of Eli. "Listen to me, sweetheart. We're going downstairs, okay? It's the safest place right now." Eli's eyes were wide with fear. "What about those people? We can't let them find us." "Do you trust me?" He nodded. Shaky. She grabbed his hand. The knock came again, louder this time. Claire pulled him toward the bookshelf and swung it aside. The door behind it gaped open like a waiting mouth. They moved quickly, descending into the dark. She flicked on her flashlight. The stairs were as silent as before the bunker, just as untouched. As they reached the bottom, she turned, preparing to bolt the steel door behind them, but froze. The bolts only locked from the outside. A steel door designed to keep things in or keep others out, if closed the right way. But not from within. She couldn't trap them down here. Not if those people found the door and opened it. "Come on," she whispered. She scanned the bunker again, searching for anything she might have missed. Then she saw it. A second door, smaller, narrower, partially hidden behind a stack of storage crates. She rushed over, dragging the crates aside. The door opened with a rusty shriek. Behind it, an escape tunnel. Narrow, reinforced with old timber, sloped upward into darkness. She pushed Eli forward. "Go. Just keep going. Don't stop." He hesitated. "Please." He nodded and crawled inside. Claire followed, hunched over the ceiling so low she could barely move without scraping her shoulders. The air smelled of earth and metal. Behind them from above, a sound split the silence. Wood splintering. The front door forced open. Voices echoed through the cabin. Boots on floorboards. They had entered. Claire's heart pounded. She pushed faster, urging Eli forward. The tunnel twisted, climbing in slow, uneven inclines. Dirt crumbled from the walls with every movement. Her flashlight beam bounced wildly. Then light ahead. A faint gray glow filtered through cracks. The tunnel ended at a wooden hatch. Claire shoved it open and crawled out into a grove behind the house 100 yards away. Snow crunched beneath her boots. She pulled Eli out behind her and shut the door, hiding it again with dead branches. From here through the trees, she could see both her car and the SUV. The figures were inside the cabin now, searching. Calm, efficient, like they knew what they were looking for. Eli looked up at her, shivering. What do we do? Claire scanned the clearing. They couldn't drive her car. The engine would give them away. But the SUV, the keys were still in the ignition. She made a split-second decision. One that her past self, the woman who followed every rule, who paid bills on time, who apologized for things that weren't her fault, would never recognize. She ran to the SUV, opened the driver's side door, and climbed in. The keys were there. No alarm. Eli followed. She reached for the ignition, then stopped. She turned, ran back to her Honda, popped the trunk, and grabbed the emergency duffel, cash, burner phone, spare clothes. Then she jumped back into the SUV and started it. The engine purred to life. Voices shouted from inside the cabin. Too late. Claire hit the gas and tore down the road. Behind them, the trees blurred. Snow fell harder. In the rearview mirror, 3 figures burst out of the cabin. One of them raising a hand as if to yell, but no sound carried over the engine. They vanished around a bend. Eli didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, "Where are we going?" Claire didn't look at him. Her hands gripped the wheel so tightly, her knuckles were white. "I don't know," she said. "But we can't go home. Not now. Maybe not ever." The gas station on the edge of town was lit by one flickering bulb above a cracked awning. It looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s, maybe earlier. That was exactly why Claire had stopped there. The SUV idled by the pumps. Eli was asleep in the passenger seat, curled under his coat, his backpack clutched like a life vest. He hadn't spoken much since they'd escaped the forest. Claire didn't blame him. The silence between them wasn't just exhaustion, it was fear in hibernation. She stood in the phone booth beside the convenience store, the receiver to her ear, listening to the long, slow drone of the landline, trying to make a connection. The air was biting cold. Her fingers ached, her legs stiff from the hours of driving. The booth stank of mildew and old cigarettes, but it felt like a sanctuary, one of the last places someone couldn't trace with a satellite or track through a signal. The phone clicked, then rang. 3 rings. 4. "Hello," a gruff voice answered. "Mr. Beckett." Claire said, her voice hoarse. There was a pause. "Claire. Where are you? Are you okay? I'm not sure. I found things in the house. You didn't tell me there was a bunker." "I didn't know," Beckett said immediately. "What did you find?" "I can't explain everything now. There were crates, labeled government property, gold, files, things with federal seals, and someone came to the house. 3 people. They said they were from the Treasury." "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Did they hurt you?" "No. But they would have if I'd stayed." Another pause. "You need to disappear," Beckett said. "Right now. Don't go home. Don't contact anyone else. Not family, not friends, no one. That's already the plan." "Where are you?" Claire looked around. The town wasn't even on most maps. Middle of nowhere. "I've been driving south for hours. I'm not far from the border. You're heading into Oregon, Canada." Beckett let out a breath. Smart. "Listen carefully. There's someone I trust. Her name is Marla Tran. She's a journalist, investigative national security stuff. She's been looking into Cold War black ops for years. If there's anyone who can help you and keep you alive, it's her. A journalist. She's not just any journalist. She's broken major government scandals. She won't sell you out." Claire hesitated. "I have a kid with me." "I know. That's why I'm giving you her direct contact. But you have to make the decision. If you don't trust her, keep running." "I'm tired of running," Claire said softly. Beckett gave her the number. A burner cell, no digital footprint. Claire wrote it down in the corner of a gas receipt. Then he gave her one last piece of advice. "Don't use your real name. Not even for motel sign-ins. Not for border checkpoints. Don't think of yourself as Claire Whitaker anymore." "Who am I then, someone they can't find?" She hung up and stepped back into the cold. The snow had started falling again, slow, thick flakes drifting like ash. Claire looked at her reflection in the dark SUV window. She didn't recognize herself. Inside the convenience store, she bought gas with cash and filled up the tank. Then she grabbed a burner phone and 2 prepaid SIM cards. No questions asked. The clerk didn't even look at her face. Back on the road, she drove in silence. Hours passed. Trees gave way to flatlands, then winding hills again. Eli stirred occasionally but didn't wake. His face looked softer when he slept less guarded. Claire felt a pang in her chest. He shouldn't have to carry this. Not any of it. By the time the sun broke over the horizon, she'd crossed into Canada. The checkpoint had been nothing, a sleepy border guard waving her through after a glance at her passport and a quick question about family. She told him she was visiting an old friend outside Vancouver. That was technically true now. By noon, they reached the safe house. It was a small one-story cottage nestled between pine trees off a narrow access road. Marla had arranged everything. A retired professor owned the place, someone with no social media, no digital lease records, and a strict "don't ask, don't tell" policy. Claire pulled into the gravel driveway and killed the engine. Eli opened his eyes. "Where are we?" "Somewhere safe," she said. "For now." The door opened before they knocked. A woman in her 50s stood in the threshold. Short black hair, swept back glasses perched on the edge of her nose. She wore a flannel button-down and jeans and looked like she'd just stepped out of a university lounge. But her eyes, sharp, clear, steady, were anything but casual. "You must be Claire," she said. "And you're Marla." "Let's skip the introductions," Marla said. "Come in before someone sees you." The inside of the house was warm and quiet. Books lined every wall. There were 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a fireplace that crackled softly. Marla made tea while Claire sat on the worn couch trying to stay upright. Eli curled up on the other end, eyes drifting closed again. After a few sips, Claire spoke. "I didn't think anyone would believe me." Marla leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Try me." So Claire told her. Everything. The house, the food in the pantry, the hidden door, the steel vault, the gold bars, the documents, Samuel's letter, the 3 people who came looking. Marla didn't interrupt once, only nodded, occasionally took notes on a legal pad. When Claire finished, Marla leaned back and exhaled. "You just unearthed a ghost fund that built empires." Claire blinked. "Excuse me, Project Cobalt. It was rumored to exist. A Cold War black fund that operated outside of congressional oversight. The kind of thing used for political bribes, off-book assassinations, secret wars, money no one could trace." "But why Samuel? They used civilians," Marla explained. "People who lived in remote areas didn't ask questions and could be trusted to keep secrets, or too scared to talk. Your uncle wasn't the only one, but he might have been the last one who kept records." Claire rubbed her temples. "I don't want any part of this." "You already have a part," Marla said. "The only question is whether you want to survive it." Claire looked at Eli sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. I don't want to hide forever. You might not have to, Marla said. If we tell the story on our terms, you flip the script. They can't hunt you if the world's watching. But we'll need proof. Documents, photos, everything. Claire nodded slowly. I'll get it to you. Marla leaned forward again. One more thing. Until this story is public, you are a target. They will come. They will watch. They'll use every trick in the book to find you. Claire met her gaze. Then we tell the story. Claire stood over the kitchen counter, eyes blurry from lack of sleep, staring at the first document she had photographed from the footlocker. Her hands trembled, not because she was afraid they had passed fear 3 nights ago, but because she understood now what she was holding. Stamped across the top in faded red ink, classified, Project Cobalt, eyes only. Naomi Delgado leaned over her shoulder, flipping pages on her laptop, faster than Claire could track. She wore fingerless gloves, her sleeves pushed up to her elbows, hair tied into a messy bun. The older woman's presence was calm, but wired, like every part of her was tuned to a frequency the rest of the world couldn't hear. This is insane, Claire whispered. These names, these signatures, they were real people. Naomi looked up briefly, her eyes sharp behind thin-framed glasses. Are. Not were. Claire frowned. What do you mean? Naomi tapped the corner of the screen. 3 of these signatories are still alive. One is sitting on the board of a major defense contractor. Another is a consultant for the Treasury Department. Claire's heart twisted, and the third, Naomi's expression, shifted, her voice dropping. Harrison Caldwell. Claire had seen that name. It was in the final folder she'd scanned. Not front and center, but threaded through the documents like an invisible hand, moving pieces behind the curtain. Caldwell's name had appeared on approval memos, shipment manifests, even a direct authorization for the bunker's funding. Who is he? Claire asked. Back then, just a mid-level bureaucrat, Naomi said. Now he's a power broker, former deputy secretary of the Treasury, major political donor, clean public image, high-value endorsements, untouchable. Claire shook her head. But this connects him to stolen federal assets, to a conspiracy. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Exactly. That's why we can't just publish a blog post and hope it sticks. We need to be surgical. Every claim has to be cross-verified. Every document matched with something in the National Archives. Otherwise, they'll bury you in discredit and lawsuits before the ink's dry. Claire looked down at the gold seal at the bottom of the page. Her stomach knotted. I don't want money, she muttered. I don't want revenge. I just want to be safe. Naomi's tone softened. I know. That's why we're doing this right. Marla entered from the back room, rubbing her eyes and holding a fresh cup of coffee. Everything's still running. We're good, Naomi replied. Scrambled signal VPN rerouted through 6 nodes, and this cabin's off-grid. They'd have to triangulate off your heartbeat to find us. Claire managed a small, tight smile. Marla sat beside her. You did the hardest part. You found the truth. Now it's our job to tell it in a way that makes it undeniable. Claire leaned forward. So what's next? Naomi rotated the laptop. We start here. The screen showed a military manifest clearly labeled 1959 with coordinates blacked out. Next to it, Naomi had matched a satellite image of the Whitaker property, highlighting the location of the bunker with near-perfect alignment. There were at least 6 drop points, Naomi explained, all in similar rural locations across the U.S., all designed to hide untraceable funds. Why gold? Claire asked. cash rots. Paper trails burn, Naomi said. Gold lasts forever, and it doesn't ask questions. Marla nodded. We suspect Project Cobalt was a black-budget operation, off-books funding for activities Congress either didn't know about or deliberately ignored: espionage coups, bribery, weapons trafficking. You name it. Claire sat back. So my uncle wasn't a hoarder. He was a vault. Marla's voice was gentle. He was a liability. The room went quiet. Eli's voice floated from the hallway. Mom Claire turned quickly. He stood in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. He looked smaller here, surrounded by strangers and secrets. You okay, sweetheart? He nodded slowly. Had a dream. The kind that feels real. She knelt beside him. You're safe. We're safe. He stared at her for a long moment. Is this going to end? Claire swallowed. Yeah, it will. He returned to bed without another word. Marla waited a beat, then leaned in. We've got about a 2-week window before this breaks wide open. Once the story gets out, they'll lose the advantage. Until then, you and Eli stay dark. We'll handle the rest. Claire nodded. What about Caldwell? Naomi smirked. I've already pinged a few quiet sources, just enough to let him know someone's looking. You're poking the bear, Naomi said. I'm rattling the cage. If he reacts, we learn. If he doesn't, we push harder. Claire stood and crossed the room, staring out the small window toward the tree line. Snow fell lightly again, muffling everything. The world looked peaceful, but she knew better now. The silence had teeth. You just unearthed a ghost fund that built empires, Naomi said, again voice reverent. Claire didn't respond. She was watching a figure move just beyond the trees. Not close, not approaching, just watching. She narrowed her eyes, then blinked. Gone. She stepped back from the window and turned to Marla. We're not as invisible as we think. Marla nodded grimly. They're watching for the story. Not for you yet. Claire shook her head. They're watching both. Naomi shut the laptop. We'll start moving pieces tomorrow. I have a contact in Ottawa who can dig into Cobalt's financial footprints, and we'll need a second safe house soon. Once the story gains traction, we become targets too. Claire looked toward the hallway, where Eli had disappeared. She didn't say what she was thinking. He deserves a life that isn't borrowed. He deserves to be a kid, not a witness. But that meant following this through, to the end. She turned back to the table. I need to go back. Marla raised an eyebrow. To the house, there's more in the bunker. I didn't take everything. I couldn't. There were too many files. I need to scan the rest. And I need to know if they've been there since. Marla hesitated. It's a risk. I can do it alone, Claire said. No one's looking for me there right now. They think we ran. They think we're hiding. Naomi nodded slowly. If you're going to do it, it has to be soon. Tomorrow night. Marla studied her, then finally said, We'll prep you a clean phone and off-grid gear. But if anything feels wrong, anything, you get out. Claire's jaw tightened. I will. But in her gut, she knew this wasn't just about finishing what they started. It was about owning it. Samuel had died with the weight of this secret. He'd passed it to her because he believed she could carry it. Now it was time to prove he was right. The snow had stopped falling by the time Claire reached the edge of the forest. The clouds had broken open above her, revealing stars scattered across a black canvas, cold and far away. She killed the SUV's headlights a half-mile from the house and navigated the rest of the distance on foot boots, crunching softly through packed snow, breath fogging in front of her. Every tree creaked in the wind. Every shadow felt like it had a heartbeat. But the house was still there. Silent. Motionless. Waiting. Claire crouched near the base of a pine, pulling binoculars from her coat. She scanned the cabin windows, first still boarded. The porch light she'd left broken still hung in pieces. The front door had been resealed with a wooden plank nailed haphazardly over the frame. Someone had been here. But not recently. Her gut tensed anyway. She waited 5 minutes, then 10. No lights. No movement. Just the distant rustle of wind slipping through trees. Finally, she moved. She entered the house the same way she had left it, through the side door, using the key Samuel had hidden under a stone near the chimney. The door creaked softly as it opened. Inside, the smell hit her first. Cold wood, stale dust, faint traces of gasoline and damp paper. She stepped carefully, flashlight off, letting the weak moonlight guide her. She knew the layout now. Knew where the boards would squeal if she stepped wrong. Knew where the air was colder above the bunker. She reached the bookshelf and pressed her palm against it. Still there. Still hiding what should have never been found. She swung it aside, then opened the steel door and descended into the vault. The light still worked. She flipped the switch and exhaled slowly as the fluorescent bulbs flickered on. It looked untouched. The crates, the shelves, the footlocker, everything as she left it. She crossed the room quickly and opened the remaining files. Her fingers moved fast now, scanning and photographing, checking dates and names. Naomi needed everything, even the metadata. No page could be left behind. That's when she saw it. A second footlocker, smaller, under one of the steel shelving units. She hadn't noticed it before. Claire pulled it out and opened the latches. Inside were a dozen sealed envelopes, all marked with a single name, Harrison Caldwell. Each one was labeled with dates. 1952 through 1971, and stamped in faded ink disposal records, redaction approvals, cobalt purge authorization. Claire's blood ran cold. She pulled out one envelope and opened it. Inside were scanned memos and typed letters, all bearing Caldwell's name in the header or signature block. And the content was worse than she imagined. They weren't just approvals. They were erasures. Entire families relocated. Whistleblowers blacklisted or committed to psychiatric facilities. Names removed from birth certificates. Witnesses vanished. She pulled out a photograph clipped to one file. A man in a military uniform standing in front of a bunker. On the back, subject numbered 18. Removed March 1963. Caldwell present. Claire stared at it, fingers trembling. He hadn't just signed off on Project Cobalt. He's not just in the documents, he helped erase them. Her whisper echoed against concrete walls. She stood suddenly, her head spinning. This wasn't just about gold. This wasn't even just about theft. This was genocide by bureaucracy. She took photos of every page, her phone nearly full now. Then she sealed the envelopes again and placed them back in the locker. A sound echoed upstairs. Not loud, but real. A boot. On wood. Claire froze. Another step. Someone was in the house. She moved instantly, switching off the bunker lights. Darkness swallowed her. She didn't breathe. Listened. Counted. One person. Maybe two. Too heavy to be animals. She reached into her coat. and pulled the small revolver Marla had given her just in case. Claire had never held a gun until 2 days ago. She hated the feel of it in her hand. But tonight, it wasn't about what she hated. It was about getting back to Eli. The sound of footsteps moved toward the living room. She slipped through the hidden tunnel again, flashlight-covered revolver in hand. The tunnel felt longer this time. Every creak and crumble of dirt made her flinch. Her mind replayed the files she'd read, the faces, the signatures. Harrison Caldwell wasn't just a remnant of the Cold War. He was alive, active, dangerous, and she had the proof. She reached the hatch, pushed it open, and emerged into the frozen brush behind the house. The air slapped her skin. Her breath felt like fire in her lungs. She didn't stop running. She reached the SUV and climbed in, pulling the door shut silently. Then she sat head down, hands gripping the wheel, forcing her pulse to slow. In the rearview mirror, the house remained still. But someone was in there. Someone looking for what she'd already taken. She started the engine and pulled away, headlights off until she reached the main road. 15 minutes later, she was on the highway. Her phone vibrated. One message from Naomi. "All clear on our end. Stories in prep." "You good?" Claire typed back. "No. But I have the final piece." The reply came instantly. "We go live in 48 hours." Claire's hands were shaking. Not from fear. Not this time. This time it was something else. A reckoning. The cabin was darker than before. Or maybe it was just Claire's eyes straining from 3 straight nights of no real sleep and the weight of a 1,000-page secret pressing into her chest. Naomi sat at the dining table, 3 laptops open around her fingers, moving like a pianist. The room was filled with low-light, buzzing screens and the quiet intensity of people preparing to drop a bomb. Marla stood at the window, arms crossed, peeking through the curtains like she expected headlights to roll up the driveway any minute. Claire sat beside Eli on the couch, rubbing his back gently as he read a worn comic book. He was calmer now, safe-fed, warm, but Claire could still feel how tightly he clung to her presence. He hadn't let her out of his sight since she came back from the house. On the wall behind them, a large corkboard had been pinned with photos, documents, and timelines, an evidence map stretching decades. Caldwell's name appeared again and again, always just behind the curtain. Never the face, always the hand. Naomi cleared her throat. "Okay, it's time." Claire stood and joined her at the table. Marla moved in behind them. "I've secured the leak drop with 4 international partners," Naomi said. "Germany, Canada, the UK, and 1 anonymous node in South Africa. If anything happens to our feed, it'll still go live on mirrored sites." Claire nodded, trying to absorb it all. "We've got press kits ready," Marla added. "We'll release the story in phases, first the documents, then the list of names. Finally, your video testimony. We build pressure slowly so they can't spin the narrative before it hits." "And once it's out?" Claire asked. Naomi looked up at her with steady eyes. "Then we burn it down." Claire didn't flinch. "If we publish this, we don't just burn bridges, we burn a system." "Exactly," Naomi said. "And systems don't go down quietly." She tapped a key. The countdown began, 24 hours until the drop went live. Claire exhaled slowly. "What do we do until then?" "We wait," Marla said, "and we watch the doors." Naomi shut one of the laptops, stood and stretched. "I'll rotate the VPNs again. Keep us invisible for 1 more night." Claire returned to the couch. Eli looked up at her. "Is it almost over?" he asked softly. She paused, brushing hair from his forehead. "Almost." He didn't ask what over meant. Neither of them really knew. That night, no one slept. By morning, the snow had picked up again. Wind beat against the cabin's old siding like a warning. Claire sat at the kitchen table sipping black coffee. Her hands didn't tremble anymore. She felt hollow, clear. Naomi's voice cut through the silence. "We have a problem." Claire shot up. "What is it?" Naomi was at the computer, eyes narrowed. "The drop servers are fine, but I'm picking up surveillance chatter on a private contractor band." Which means Marla asked. "They found us. Or they think they have." Claire moved to the window. 2 black SUVs. Just off the trail, no lights. Parked like predators waiting for a blink. "How long do we have?" she asked. Naomi didn't look away from the screen. "Depends if they're watching or moving." Marla already had the go-bags by the door. We split up. 2 cars. Staggered exits. We reconvene at Site 2. Claire grabbed Eli's coat and helped him slip it on. "We're running again?" he asked, trying not to sound scared. "We're staying ahead," Claire said, kneeling in front of him. "Just like before." Eli nodded. "Brave." Marla handed Claire a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Hard backup. If we get separated, you finish the upload." Claire closed her fist around it. "Got it." Naomi stood and looked at her. "If we don't make it, promise you'll burn the whole thing." Claire held her gaze, no matter what. They moved fast. 2 exits, 2 directions. Claire and Eli took Naomi's Subaru. Marla and Naomi left in the backup Jeep. They drove in silence for 10 miles, no headlights weaving through service roads. Claire checked the rear view constantly. Nothing. No tail. No drone. Just snow and tree shadows stretching thin. Half an hour later, Claire pulled into a rest stop outside Kelowna, tucked beside a mountain ridge. A rendezvous point. She parked under a pine and turned off the engine. "Are we safe?" Eli asked. Claire looked around. Empty. Quiet. For now. She stepped out of the car to get signal. The burner phone buzzed immediately. 1 message. They hit Site 2. Marla gone. Naomi safe. We're splitting again. Upload now. Claire's heart stopped. Gone. She called. No answer. Just static. Eli stepped out beside her, shivering. Claire looked at the flash drive in her palm. That was it then. The line between exposing the truth and letting it vanish forever was the size of her thumb. She turned back to the car and opened her laptop. The hotspot took 30 seconds to connect. The upload queue blinked red. No signal strong enough to start. Claire looked around. Nothing but rock and trees. Then she remembered 10 miles ahead there was an old ranger station. Remote. Elevated. And maybe still connected to satellite. She climbed in, turned the engine over, and sped off again. Eli watched her worried. What happened to Miss Marla? Claire gripped the wheel harder. She kept her promise. The ranger station was empty. Dusty. But the satellite terminal still blinked green. Claire shoved the flash drive into the USB port and opened Naomi's app. The files loaded. Upload began 1%. She watched every tick. Eli stood behind her, quiet. At 37%, a sound echoed outside. A crunch in the snow. Claire drew the revolver from the glove box and pushed Eli behind her. The front door creaked. A figure stepped inside. It wasn't a soldier. It wasn't Caldwell. It was a woman. Blood on her jacket. Limp in her step. Naomi. Claire rushed forward, catching her as she stumbled. I doubled back, Naomi gasped. They got Marla, but not everything. Claire guided her to a chair. We're almost there, she said. The upload's going. Naomi looked at the screen. 81%. You finish it, she whispered. You see it through. Claire nodded, holding her hand. Outside engines echoed again. Another convoy. This time no hiding. Claire turned to Eli. You remember what I said, she asked. He nodded. Go to the crawl space behind the station. Wait for me. Eli hesitated. You'll come? She leaned down and kissed his forehead. Always. He ran. Claire watched until he vanished, then turned to Naomi. Both women stood. The screen flashed 100% complete. Files disseminated. Naomi smiled weakly. Claire walked to the door. She could already see headlights cresting the hill. Let them come. The truth was already out. The first shot shattered the front window of the ranger station. Claire ducked low, grabbing Naomi and pulling her to the floor. Shards of glass rained across the old wood floor, the cold wind rushing in behind them, carrying snow needles and the sharp scent of gunpowder. The computer screen still glowed behind them, with two words that now meant everything: upload complete. They're not waiting anymore, Naomi muttered, pressing a blood-soaked rag tighter to her ribs. Her face was pale, her voice faint but focused. They know. Claire scrambled to the wall, peeking through the slats of a broken shutter. Two black SUVs sat nestled between trees on the ridge above them. Armed men in matte black tactical gear moved methodically down the slope, fanning out toward the cabin like wolves in a hunt. They weren't FBI. They weren't police. They were ghosts, contractors. They don't want survivors, Claire whispered. Another shot rang out, punching through the wooden wall inches from her head. Splinters exploded against her cheek. She ducked back, heart hammering. They're sweeping, Naomi said. 5 minutes, maybe less. We need a distraction. Claire scanned the room. Her eyes fell on the old gas lantern near the desk, the fire extinguisher, and a can of lighter fluid by the emergency supplies. Not much, but it would have to do. I'll make them look the wrong way, Claire said. Naomi, you crawl to the front door. When you hear the explosion, run. Head north into the trees. Eli and I will take the back. Naomi coughed. I don't think I can run. You won't have to. Just get into the brush. Stay low. Claire moved quickly, stuffing a rag into the lantern's opening and soaking it in the lighter fluid. Her hands worked fast, fueled by adrenaline and instinct. She'd never made a Molotov cocktail in her life, but fear had a way of teaching quickly. She struck a match, waited one breath, then threw it through the broken front window. The lantern arced out, spinning once in the air before smashing against a rock. The resulting fireball lit up the woods like a sunrise. Shouts echoed from the forest. Two of the men near the tree line dove for cover. Now! Go, Claire hissed. Naomi pushed herself up and staggered toward the front. Claire turned, sprinting to the back utility hatch and yanking it open. Eli, she hissed into the crawl space. Come now. His voice came fast, scared. I'm here. He crawled out, bundled in his coat, eyes wide with fear, but no hesitation. Claire scooped him up and slung the emergency bag over her shoulder. They slipped out the back of the station, plunging into the snow-covered brush. Claire didn't look back. Every second counted. Behind them, the sounds of chaos spread. Fire. Shouting. 2 more gunshots cracked the silence. They ran for half a mile through the woods, weaving through underbrush and ducking under snow-laden branches until Claire found the outcropping She remembered an old trailhead marker covered in moss and ice. She dropped behind it and checked Eli's breathing. He was cold, scared, but safe. "Are we okay?" he whispered. "For now," she said, brushing snow from his face. "But we don't stop." Claire checked her watch. 9:13 a.m. She took out the flare gun. Naomi had instructed her to launch the first flare only if everything had gone live. The second would trigger the extraction protocol. She loaded the second flare and aimed high. The red light streaked into the sky, bursting silently above the treetops. Then, silence. Claire held her breath. Seconds passed. A minute. Then the deep thump-thump of rotors. She looked up as a sleek black helicopter descended from behind the ridge. It cut through the low clouds like a blade, its lights sweeping the forest floor. The chopper flared and hovered above a nearby clearing. A side door opened and a rope ladder dropped. Two figures in civilian tactical gear rappelled down, scanning the forest quickly. Claire Whitaker, one shouted. "Move to the clearing, hands visible." Claire waved. "We're here." She hoisted Eli onto her back and ran through the snowdrifts. The agents met her halfway, each grabbing one arm to support them as they moved toward the ladder. "Where's Naomi?" the first agent asked. "She was hit," Claire said breathlessly. "She went north. We split. We'll find her." They ascended the ladder fast. Once on board, the door slammed shut and the helicopter lifted with a roar. Eli clung to Claire as she collapsed into a jump seat. Across from her, one of the agents offered her a headset. "Name's Agent Thomas Green. We're part of an interagency response team. Your data leak hit hard." Claire put the headset on. "Where are we going?" "Safe house in Vancouver. You're not alone anymore." He handed her a tablet. On the screen were dozens of headlines from around the world: massive Cold War, cover-up, exposed secret gold cache, uncovered in Oregon wilderness, Caldwell, named in unauthorized covert operation. Claire scrolled, breath-catching. It was real. They couldn't erase it now. Green leaned in. "We've got international coverage. Your story hit every wire service within 20 minutes. Caldwell's name is trending globally. 2 Senate committees are demanding emergency hearings." Claire barely processed the words. Eli tugged her sleeve. "Mom, does this mean it's over?" Claire looked at him. "No, sweetheart," she said. "It means we finally get to fight in daylight." An hour later, in the Vancouver safe house, Claire met with a joint legal team and a security advisor. Naomi had been found alive but in critical condition and was being airlifted to a secure hospital. Marla's body was recovered and already being honored by an independent journalist collective that vowed to carry on her work. The weight in Claire's chest shifted, not gone, but shared. In the living room, she watched Eli fall asleep on a new couch. No bunker, no forest, no gunfire. Just warmth. Peace. Green entered the room with a file. "Claire," he said, "there's something you should see." Inside the file was a list of names. People who had benefited from cobalt. People still in power. "Caldwell isn't the only one," Green said. "You started something. We need to know if you'll see it through." Claire looked at the names, then at her son, then back to Green. "I didn't choose this story," she said, "but I choose how it ends." The Vancouver safe house sat at the edge of a snow-dusted bluff overlooking the steel-gray waters of the Strait of Georgia. Inside the walls were quiet, too quiet. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was charged, expectant, like a breath held too long. Claire sat at the kitchen table with a mug of untouched tea in front of her. Eli was still asleep in the adjacent room, and for once she could hear the soft rhythm of his breathing without fear. But peace was a thin layer already cracking beneath her fingers. Across from her sat Agent Thomas Green scrolling through updates on his secure tablet. Naomi was stable but unconscious. Marla's death had become a headline. The footage of Claire's testimony had already been viewed over 80 million times worldwide. "You're a symbol now," Green said without looking up. "The whistleblower who found the vault. The mother who stood her ground." Claire didn't answer right away. Her eyes were on the folder still open between them, full of names, dates, wire transfers, redacted memos, and the unmistakable fingerprints of power. "How many more are there?" she finally asked. Green paused. "At least 9 high-ranking officials tied to Project Cobalt. Some retired, most not. One currently sits on a National Security Advisory Board. 2 others are active CEOs in the energy and tech sectors." Claire's mouth went dry. And Caldwell Green hesitated, then turned the tablet toward her. "He fled D.C. early this morning. His jet landed in Zurich. Swiss authorities say he's on vacation." Claire scoffed. "He's running. He's repositioning," Green corrected. "There's a difference." She leaned back in her chair, letting the cold reality settle. "They weren't done. Not even close. You've already done more than anyone could ask," Green added. "If you want out, if you and Eli want witness protection, a fresh name, a life far away, we can arrange that. No one would blame you." Claire stared at him. Her fingers tapped the edge of her cup. Then slowly she shook her head. "You don't run from truth," she said. "You carry it." She stood and looked toward the hallway where Eli slept. "Because if you don't, it dies. And they win." Later that day, Claire stood at a press podium in a secure location. She wore a dark blazer, hair pulled back, hands trembling just slightly on the edges of her printed statement. But her voice didn't shake. "I was never supposed to find it," she began. "Not the house, not the vault, not the story. I inherited something I didn't ask for. But once I opened that steel door, I saw what couldn't stay buried." She looked up at the cameras. Flashes went off. Lights blinded her. The weight of a nation's eyes fell onto her shoulders. This isn't just about gold or corruption. It's about silence. About how power builds walls around its sins and convinces the world they're foundations. It's about what happens when ordinary people like you and me refuse to keep quiet. The room erupted into questions as soon as she stepped away. Later, she sat in a dark SUV with Green beside her. "You just declared war," he said. "No," Claire replied. "I just told the truth." That night, someone tried to hack the Mirror servers. 3 independent sites went dark. Naomi's files were targeted. Her hospital was placed on lockdown. Claire didn't sleep. Instead, she stayed up reviewing the next wave of evidence. Caldwell's offshore accounts, a whistleblower from the Treasury Department who had come forward anonymously, a photo of Caldwell from 1969 standing next to a CIA official who had vanished a year later under classified circumstances. Each piece was another tile in the mosaic. Green walked in just before dawn. "I have something." He handed her a printed email. It had been flagged by intelligence intercepts. Caldwell's legal team was organizing a press conference. Not to deny, but to recontextualize. "They're going to spin it," Claire said. "They're going to drown it in noise." Claire folded the paper. "Then we need volume." Green tilted his head. "Go on." "We give our story to the people who can't be bought. Independent journalists, student publications, activists, investigative collectives, everywhere all at once. They can't control that many voices. You want to weaponize public truth. I want to take it back." By mid-morning, a team of coordinators had reached out across 47 countries. Archives were sent, witnesses scheduled, legal affidavits prepared. Within 12 hours, a coordinated information wave hit the internet, social media, podcast platforms, and streaming news outlets. Caldwell's press conference never happened. Instead, he was met with protests the moment he stepped off his Zurich estate. And for the first time in 30 years, the world saw him as something other than a patriot. They saw the truth. Eli watched some of it on Claire's phone, his eyes wide. "Are you going to be famous now?" he asked. Claire laughed softly, tiredly. "I think I already am." "Do we have to keep running?" Claire shook her head. "We already did the running. Now we stand." He curled up beside her on the safe house couch, hand gripping hers tight. Outside, snow began to fall again. Green entered the room once more, this time holding a file stamped "Urgent." "What now?" Claire asked. "Something unexpected. A source from inside the National Security Archive just dumped a new batch of files." Claire opened the folder. Inside were photos. One showed Caldwell, clearly older, standing in front of a private facility. The sign read, "Cobalt West Vault, Eastern 2001. Her heart dropped. "There's more?" she asked. Green nodded. Caldwell didn't just protect the old network. He built a new one. And it's still operating. Claire closed the folder slowly. Her story hadn't ended. It had just revealed its second chapter. "You up for it?" Green asked. Claire looked out the window, the snow painting everything clean again. "We exposed a monster," she said. "Now we follow its shadow." She walked over to the fire and tossed the urgent folder onto the table. "We're not just witnesses anymore. We're historians." Green smiled faintly. "That's a hell of a job description." Claire picked up the pen from the table. "Then let's keep writing." Snow fell thick and silent across the streets of D.C., turning the marble buildings into pale ghosts beneath a gray winter sky. Claire walked up the Capitol steps, the air cold in her lungs, her breath rising in slow clouds. She wore a plain black coat, her shoulders square, her eyes steady. The noise of the reporters behind the barriers, flashing cameras, shouted questions barely registered. Inside the hearing chamber, it was standing room only. Cameras from 5 major networks rolled quietly as senators adjusted their ties and staffers leaned in to whisper updates. At the center of it all was Claire, seated at a long oak table, a microphone in front of her, and a name placard that read, "Claire Whitaker, Civilian Witness, Project Cobalt Disclosure." To her right sat Naomi, now recovered, but thinner, her hands folded. To her left was Green, present as a legal observer. And behind them, dozens of others, journalists, victims' families, retired agents, those who had carried their own pieces of truth, and now watched someone finally speak it aloud. The chair of the Oversight Committee called the session to order. Claire stood and took the oath. The room hushed as she began. "I didn't come here today to accuse a government. I came to tell you how people disappeared not from Earth, but from memory. I came to explain how silence can become policy, how fear becomes institutionalized, and how greed hides best in patriotism." She paused, letting her words settle. For decades, Operation Cobalt was more than a secret. It was a machine, a system, not just about stolen gold or shadow budgets, but about the erasure of accountability. People were silenced, some with money, some with threats, some with death. Senators shifted. Some leaned forward interested. Others avoided her gaze entirely. "I didn't seek this story. I inherited it. I stumbled into it through a rusted door in a frozen house I didn't want. But once I saw what was inside, once I read those files, saw those faces, I couldn't unsee it. A large screen displayed photographs, redacted files, maps, a single gold bar stamped with the U.S. Treasury's seal. Another showed a young man in uniform smiling beside a steel vault door. Then one of Caldwell. "I've been called brave, a whistleblower, a hero," Claire continued. "But I'm just a mother who decided not to let a lie bury another generation. I didn't want my son to grow up believing that silence was safety." Her voice didn't waver, not once. And I stand here today asking not for revenge, but for accountability, for the truth to be recorded, heard, and remembered. Because if history has taught us anything, it's this: when we stop demanding truth, we start erasing it. A silence fell over the chamber. The chair cleared his throat, visibly moved. "Ms. Whitaker, thank you. We'll begin questions shortly." Claire sat back down, her hands still. The rest of the hearing played out like a slow dismantling of a fortress. Senators grilled Green. Naomi detailed technical elements of the upload and the original encryption process. One former intelligence officer broke down in tears as he admitted to redacting files that condemned innocent people to disappearances. By the end of the day, 4 officials had been subpoenaed. 2 resigned before nightfall. Caldwell remained out of reach, but no longer untouchable. When Claire exited the